Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Dustin Ray.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we're going to discuss AI-driven pull requests and how they're getting too large, or are they too large? And of course, it depends is always the answer. So we're
See you
good
next
here.
time for
See you
this
next
week.
time. I brought this topic up because I was years ago, and by years ago I mean like decades, plural. I was the a-hole who would have these giant PRs because as I was working on a project or a ticket, I would fix things as I went along. I would do linting changes and I would fix this and I would fix that. And people would get this thing, it was to fix a bug, and there would be 20 other classes that got changed, had nothing to do with it, and everyone hated me, or everyone hated doing my PRs because it added such a cognitive load. And I have since reformed my ways and repented and become much more of your PR should be as small as possible, if not smaller. And with AI, we are now things are swinging the other way, where AI will you don't need to break things down because it doesn't have the cognitive overload to deal with all these things. And you get these giant PRs that no human could possibly review in a reasonable way, right? Like it's the old joke. If you have a 20-line PR, you'll get feedback. If you have a 1,000-line PR, somebody will say, looks good to me.
Well, that's so true, too. It still happens to me.
Yeah.
It's just fatigue, yeah.
Yeah, it's fatigue.
Yeah.
Like you won't do it. You're human. And so is this a bad thing? And I say probably most of the time, yes. That if you've got a 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 line PR, that is probably too large of it. The AI, you and the AI have taken too large of a step. And you probably should have broken that down into multiple smaller PRs. One, just because of the cognitive load, and two, the larger the thing is, the more likely that it's gone off the rails somewhere and you haven't noticed. But I think, Dustin, you kind of are swinging the opposite way of, well, if it's a new feature and and it's written all the tests, right? I think that's a good caveat in this case. It's right. We're talking about good code, or theoretically good code.
We're assuming good code.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think let's jump back and talk a little bit about what is the purpose of code review, right? The purpose of code review is to catch issues with the code, or maybe there's logical fallacies, or like there's some contradiction, or maybe there's an interface mismatch, or a very common one, which I shared a plugin before this about, like this exists already. We have this somewhere else in the code, which AI is notorious for not referencing or using what's already there and just building completely new stuff, right? So if you're looking at a
unit test frameworks on me, I'm like, what? This is part of the unit testing framework.
Yeah, it'll generate it. I said this last time. I have it generate logos. And it's like, why are you generating logos? Like, we have a logo. There's no need to generate a new logo. So yeah, I think in that case, you want to be able to catch those things in review. But like, if you think about it, how many of those things need a human to verify them? So at the same time, maybe we could only handle certain size PRs with the tools that we had 12, 24 months ago. But now, the same way that we've adapted our coding practices, I think it's now time to adapt our review practices in the same way. I don't think that means by default big PRs, are of value. But I guess the flip side to the argument is how do you continue with the velocity without just holding everything in review? And what is at that point, what is the value of human review? If humans aren't writing the next set of changes on top of the changes that you're reviewing, you really only have to understand it at the system level anyway, because you're not actually going to be the one connecting the lines of code anyway.
Sure, right.
So then I would almost say that the argument starts to lean towards, is human legibility even as valuable as it was 12 months ago?
It is not. There's Kent Beck, one of the original extreme agile programmers. He was talking. He's got a podcast now. He was talking about how he's written books on how to make clean code and code that's good for human developer, for human readable code and code that's clean and elegant. And he's like, this book is no longer relevant.
Yeah.
So is it just a matter of time before there's even maybe a new programming language where maybe humans don't even understand it? I think that gets way far into the future, but I think that's kind of like where it's shifting from us, right? Like if
There's actually an AI, the AI fear people. I think Neuralese is the language that they invented that they're talking in or something.
Yeah.
It doesn't use English as AIs talk to each other because they can talk to each other faster than using English. So I imagine that would be the case. But this kind of reminds me of a previous concept where we were talking about using some standards in your code is still nice, because if you do something where, like, if you mark paid true and that actually doesn't mean paid because you did something really weird, which we did in a previous thing, that will still confuse the AI sometimes. So it's not necessarily that things need to be human readable and perfect, but they still should be. I think clean code is still somewhat readable in that fashion, that things kind of still make sense to a human, even if something could read it faster. If you, like before, it was like, oh, the camel case names, or people who had notoriously long function names that,
Look, I learned with reverse Polish notation, and I liked it.
Well, usually if it was a really long function name, that just meant your function was too complicated and you could break it apart, and then you still have it readable, but but then it's across many files. But yeah, I think that's a really good point, Dustin, like with the idea of like, who is the review for, and if the bottleneck, now if AI is generating so much code that the bottleneck becomes review, and then you get fatigue from review, is there a way to eliminate that review such that we don't need as many humans reading it or bigger MRs, and AI helps with the review itself? Where does the human get removed from the loop?
Yeah. I think one thing that I've changed my review practices a little bit to think about less in, is it readable by a human versus can a human understand it? Like, is it coherent? Like, is it constructed in a way that it somewhat matches how, if I sat engineers in a room and came up with an ADR and like did all this stuff, would this be coherent? Like, would this be a coherent system? And I think if you use that framework, you'll often find the places where it isn't coherent. Like, just the same as when it's humans and we just miss something. There's what we call gaps or whatever. We just missed that this system also needed to pull that data in. So I kind of use that framing instead of like, how clean is the code? I think the code needs to be clean enough to read the coherence of the code. So if you have crazy function names, or you're not following like solid, like you're not using single responsibility principle, I still think clean code applies, but for a different reason. So it's readability, not from the sense of because I'm going to be there at 2 a.m. responding to an incident, or because I'm the next person that's going to be building the feature, but it's because I need some way to verify that what the code that the AI has written is coherent with the request.
So this is an interesting. I think you brought up a really good point, Dustin. And I think what's interesting is, in my mind, the size of the PR was an implicit way of limiting the scope, the size of the change before you showed it to the user, right? And so it's not that the PR needs to be small, it's that the unit of work that you're giving before you check in with the customer should be small. And PR size was I guess the historic, like you do a PR, you release to production, you show it to the customer, boom, that's the cycle. Then you go back, you get the feedback, and you come back. And now with the AI, it's like, well, sure, I can do a 20,000 line change. It took 5 minutes, and now I can go show that to the customer. Those two things, the PR size and the customer impact change used to be tightly coupled. And what you're saying, Dustin, is those things are now no longer coupled.
Yeah, I don't want to say that they're not coupled at all, but I would say it like this. So like let's take AI out of it and just see. I bet I can build the same case without AI. So like let's say you've got a principal engineer on one hand and a junior engineer on another hand. If both of these people submit 20,000 line MRs, I'm probably going to actually read the one from the principal engineer, but by default reject the one from the junior because there's just no way, right? Like the reality of that is probably not there. Like you need to like sit down and like rethink about it, right? Like I'm not even going to look into it because it's going to be, you'll open it up and there's spaghetti code and it's like, okay, already we know this isn't going to be coherent. Like the system's kind of all mixed and matched together. Like that's not going to work. So I think it's not necessarily about the size. The size is only in relation to what you can realistically manage. If you can realistically manage a 20,000 line review because you're not reviewing it in the same level of scrutiny that you would if it was a human, because a lot of your automated checks are taking care of some of the stuff that you manually had to look for before. And I think Isaac was saying this before we got on, I think this has forced a lot of teams to improve their developer experience, even though the developers aren't the ones experiencing it, because the AI has no judgment. So like it has to be like 100% correct all the time. It can't be like, well, if you do it this way, you kind of have to know about this thing that's not documented anywhere. And like that team knows about it, but no one else does. Like that doesn't work in AI. So it's like you have to remove these things now. So then that doesn't need to be reviewed for because it's no longer a hidden risk.
Yeah, I think for me that, what you're referencing was just a project I'm working on, but that evolved for me out of a fear of, what if I make this big PR that actually doesn't do anything? Like I had Claude generate it, then I look stupid, right? Because if someone like looks at the code and is like, what are you even doing? Does this even solve the problem? And I'm like, well, Claude did it. I'm just going to throw it on staging and see if it works. So I'm like, okay, well, that's a dumb way to do it. So the better way to do it is make sure my local environment is as close to parity as possible to staging and hence production, and then run a whole suite locally and then prove all the data matches what it was expected to. Then all the screenshots of any front end flows were corrected to match the Figma designs. And then once I can prove, okay, locally, here's my screenshots, I'll attach that to the description of the PR. This looks pretty good. The flow looks good. I spot checked everything. It's just essentially just checking your own work, but it's checking Claude's own work before I insult somebody with a request for a code review that doesn't do what it's supposed to do. That's how that evolved for me. And I think that's been a really good way to check it instead of just like, hitting enter on a prompt and going to lunch and be like, hey, can you review a code for me, man? Which is kind of a messed up thing to do if your code actually doesn't do it and someone gets mad reviewing all that code.
Yeah, old person story. 20 years ago, I have definitely been asked to, and more recently too, but like I've been asked to review code. I'm like, your code didn't compile.
Yeah. So it goes back to standards, right?
Exactly.
So you shouldn't be reviewing code if the checks don't pass. Oh, you don't have checks? Well, then there's kind of like your first problem. You're using humans that's a very expensive PR checker. For like, I used to say this when I won't mention the person, but there was a person basically doing linting in code review, like human, like they had no linter. So like instead of taking the time to set up the linter and make it automatic for everyone forever, it was just doing it manually. So it's like it's a very expensive linting machine. And I think the same case can be made about like a lot of the AI stuff. Like, can you get it a better output from the beginning because of, if you've done the architecture work up front, you can kind of give it that higher level guidance. And then you're just basically checking, how well did it adhere to the standards that I gave it? And then you correct all of that before you push it off on another human. But it's the same problem as before, right? Like even before AI, if you were the type of person to write a PR, not check it locally, not wait for checks, not run your tests, not see if you met coverage, like you could tell someone to go, review your PR, realize you didn't meet coverage, and now you got to make more changes and you need another review.
It's
the
just
same
a waste
thing,
of people's time.
Yeah.
I just call it disrespectful at that point. I'm like, would I appreciate someone hitting me with that review? And I'm like, it doesn't compile. Right. Are you kidding me? Like, at least have it work first,
Right. Did you actually like run this?
And
Your
no,
unit
yeah, if they
tests that.
didn't, then like, what are you doing here? Like, what title are you at?
Yeah.
What level of engineer are you? Like, come on, man.
Yeah, I think the testing that you were hitting on too, Isaac, has been pretty critical on my flow. Like I think I've seen a lot, especially in the startup phases, and I don't mean just self funded, but even in the VC funded. Like you'll see often people skip end-to-end tests just because of the expense. Like it just takes developer time to write. They're a pain to maintain. They can be kind of flaky, So there was a lot of argument in the past about what was the right amount of like end-to-end tests to like get the right, validation. And I think nowadays we can even lean harder on those, where it's like if it
Yeah,
comes through with a demo and none of the other tests break, that and they all have the same level of scrutiny because they've been built in this way, then you can continue to keep building on top of this. But I still don't think that removes Jeffrey's argument that there's a risk factor based on the size or complexity of the change, and I don't think that's something we've really like dove into in this talk. Like how do you actually make a difference there?
Right. And I think there was an implicit thing that we were talking about before the show started of a new feature, right? New development, a large PR is less risky than in a existing code. If you're changing something and the change is giant, that is implicitly more risky than if I'm writing something new and it's giant.
Yeah.
mm, maybe. My first thought is like, what if you have a really bad query in your brand new thing that can tank the database, and you didn't think about that? Like, you could still write something really risky against that doesn't scale well, and hurts your legacy thing. Um, maybe like the argument of it being less risky is still less, but it's still there. That's something my end-to-end test doesn't check, right? I have to actually go through and manually spot check the query if it were a new query to make sure it's a scaling query. So
I was even
I haven't
thinking of
solved that
like
one. Yeah.
I was thinking of like usage when Jeffrey said that. I was thinking of like, okay, if
Mm-hmm.
it's a new feature, no one has any expectations about it yet. If it's a feature that they
Mm-hmm.
use every day and then you break it, that is a big, like that's an incident. Like that's an immediate incident, that's on you. And I think maybe you have a different size relative change to those risks then. Maybe a large change PR is like you said in that 5 to 10K range, but a very large new feature is like, yeah, it's like 10 to 20. It's like the range gets bigger, because you're putting it's a whole new module. So like you got to think, maybe some of that's boilerplate. It's, tests, it's documentation. It's, so I think the 5 to 10K actual code lines changed is probably where it starts to be the threshold of like what a human can manage, day in, day out every single time.
One side thing to think about too, that I've noticed that Claude does a good job of that humans didn't in the past when it comes to 50,000 lines of code, is the commits. Claude does a pretty good
Mm-hmm.
job at like, as it's thinking through, making commits along the way of each change. So it's not just one commit with everything. It's how that thing changed over time, which is really good for itself as it goes back through to see how the component changed. It'll flag like the Jira ticket and the story, everything about that. That way, you can go back through and go, oh, this is how this thing has evolved. The human won't do that. Well, maybe they'll do it, but like 3 commits instead of like 30, you
Mm-hmm.
know, or just like delivered the feature and then it's
Yeah.
50,000 lines, right? When you can't really tell how things evolved. And that's a kind of a risky thing there too. So I think Claude does it, at least if it's risky, it's slightly de-risked, or you can see a paper trail with the commit history, which makes it better.
But you still squash and merge, right? So you only have it during the, oh, you're
No,
putting the
I
whole
leave all the
thing.
commits in there. Every little
Okay.
change it makes. I think commit history is incredibly valuable, and especially for like going back through and understanding what the original developer's intent was. I can see over
Yeah.
a 10-year history why this thing
Yeah.
changed, and that would take me forever as a human to understand all the different pieces across different repos. And so commit history
But
is
yeah,
really
yeah,
valuable for
platform
me.
mapping too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I've always been slightly against squashing, but it just seems like that's what everyone does. So
I
that's
used
fine.
to do it all the time. Like I used to squash because I thought it was cleaner, and
I still think squashing is cleaner. I think I might die on that hill. Because
that's
I think
fine. I
like
mean,
maybe I'm the type of developer that it makes more sense because like I'll
hmm,
thrash, but I want to thrash like I want to be able to thrash and it not mess up the history, you know. So like I may thrash on my local machine and still commit those, but then I don't want that to be in the official history of like it's just experimentation. It's not the real. it's not how it came out.
Maybe it depends.
Yeah. I'm almost interested to like think about that more because I'm like, man, I've been really hard on like squash and merge for like years.
I have too, until AI, and until I saw
Yeah.
how well it pieced together. Like I can look at Git history and see how something changed over time for one file, but how that's orchestrated across every other file and multiple repos, which it can do. I just can't do it at the level as a human. And
Well,
once
we're
I saw
running-
it pull in all those commits, I was like, ooh, this is really useful.
Yeah, we're running a little long, but I think that would be maybe next time of does AI change what that you would want to not squash because the
Branching
history.
rules.
Well, because one, the AI isn't going to thrash the same way, although it does thrash.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And two, AI is actually capable of looking at that giant history and making something of it where humans aren't.
Right. Yeah. A human's like, okay, this was the change. Like I always think of it as like I want to be able to cut back to a certain point.
Yeah. Maybe we should dive into that deeper and see if we can convince Dustin to not die on that hill.
would be a good one.
All right, but I think we have. Did we come to any conclusion about? I think
this was the point. Yeah. We ended up where we started.
Should PRs be smaller in the age of AI? Well, it depends.
That's not a satisfying
No, it's not
answer.
satisfying at all.
We're going to keep diving into this one.
Part 2 coming soon.
There'll be a part 2 coming soon. We need
All
a good
right.
answer. All right.
Thank you all for listening. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
Dustin Ray.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.